Hi folks, this is Matt with On Trail Training. In this video, we're going to be discussing the steering and suspension components of an 80 series Land Cruiser. We'll have other vehicles later in the series. First off, with the steering, when we put input through the steering wheel, that travels down through the steering shaft to this steering box. That in turn turns a gear in there, assisted by the power steering, turns the sector shaft right in this position. That will then rotate the pitman arm. That pitman arm then rotates back and forth, moving this drag length, which is attached to the steering knuckle or steering arm, depending on the vehicle, on the passenger side. That steers the passenger side tire. Connecting the driver's side tire behind the axle is the tie rod that ties the two together. Allows the both wheels to move in unison. As we move down the line a little bit, we've got our springs in place. We do have a bump stop. Bump stops are very important. They limit the amount of suspension up travel we have so components don't come into contact with the chassis of the vehicle. Behind that, right over here, we have a shock absorber. The spring's job is to hold the weight of the vehicle and allow for compression and droop in the suspension. The shock's job is to control that rate of motion, keeping the vehicle from bouncing after we come off bumps and obstacles. So we move down through, we've got our solid axle beam. We're discussing independent suspensions a little later. That axle is held to the vehicle by, in this case, a radius arm. This locates the axle fore and aft on the vehicle. What locates our axle body left and right is this panhard rod. Some manufacturers call this a track bar. We can adjust the length of that to position the wheels left and right. Because of this piece, this axle does not cycle straight up and down as we're cycling through the suspension. It will move in a bit of a swing and a radius. This is where bump steer happens. We're going to talk about that later. So we move on through. We've got our differential housing. This is a third member differential. Inside there, there's a whole bunch of gears and carriers and a locking differential in there. We're digging deeper to that in another video. As we keep on going down, we can see some exposed parts of our front knuckles. Inside that, there is a Burfield joint. Again, we'll dig into that a little later. As we go up a little farther a little higher into the vehicle, we do have a steering dampener in place. Difference between a steering dampener and a shock absorber. They may look alike. The shock absorber is positively charged. So as we compress it, it wants to expand. The steering dampeners will always be neutrally charged. We compress it, it stays there. We expand it, it stays there. That's to help the vibration and a little bit of shimmy in the steering as we're traveling off-road. All right, now we've moved to the back of the vehicle. I want to talk a little bit about what goes on the back side of the suspension. We've got our axle in place here, and from this view, we can get a good view of what that third member looks like. There's a ring of bolts that go around here. When I undo those bolts, pull this drive shaft, take the axle shafts out, that whole gear assembly comes out. I can then work on it on the bench. See this a lot in race cars. We can change gear ratios very quickly at a track. Our other styles, one of our other styles out there is a Salisbury, where I have to do all those adjustments and re-gearing with the gears attached inside the axle. We'll have our drive shaft come down into that. We're going to hit driveline a little bit. Differences between the front and the rear. On the front, we had those radius arms. On this, we have control arms. There is a lower and an upper control arm on these. These upper control arms are adjustable. That allows me to rotate the axle to adjust my pinion angle to eliminate drive shaft or driveline lope and keep that pinion bearing that sits just inside here nice and lubricated as we're going. So we've moved around to the back side of the axle. We still have our track bar or panhard rod in place, again locating the axle left and right on the vehicle. It's a great example where we can see how this moves. We take a look at the space between the bump stop and the tire on the driver's side versus the passenger side. We have a whole lot more space over here. It's because as this axle droops and comes to the bottom of its suspension travel, it moves over to the passenger side quite a few inches, 3-4 inches easily. Same spring and shocks doing the same jobs in the rear. We do have a sway bar in place in the rear. This sway bar's job is to keep some preload on the springs. I don't run one in the front, allows me a little better flex up front. The rear I keep in place in case I get in any panic steer situations on the road. It's going to keep the vehicle a lot more stable and not put me into a spin going down the highway.